The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So yesterday we had two Steve Bannon-related stories, both pointing to really what seems like a growing rift between the former White House propagandist, I think he called himself chief advisor, and Donald Trump, the president. One story was about Steve Bannon calling Donald Trump an 11-year-old child. The other was Steve Bannon saying that that infamous Trump Tower meeting with the Russian lawyer was, quote, treasonous, and that even if it wasn't, it's still something that they should have immediately notified the FBI about, which, of course, the Trump campaign did not do. So we did those two stories on yesterday's show. We were barely done with yesterday's show when Donald Trump retaliated, saying that Steve Bannon has, quote, lost his mind. And it leaves no doubt at this point that this is a real rift. It is unlikely to fade. And the number of repercussions that might come as a result of this, because, again, despite the Trump administration's new intentions, which I'll tell you about, to paint Bannon as, again, just kind of like an intern, he didn't really have a major role, this was someone very, very close to the president. So Trump put out a statement that is so stunning in nature that I want to look through a couple parts of it with you. And I want to be clear, there is no chance that this was actually written by Donald Trump. I actually suspect, my thought, Pat, was it's Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller seems to be the guy who writes this stuff.
It has the word whom in it, so there's no chance that Donald Trump wrote this.
Once you see whom, you know Trump didn't write the thing. Let's take a look at what this statement said, starting with, Steve Bannon has nothing to do with me or my presidency. Well, that's not true. He was your chief advisor. Chief advisor, rather. When he was fired, he not only lost his job, he lost his mind. Steve was a staffer, and I'll get back to the use of that word staffer, who worked for me after I had already won the nomination by defeating 17 candidates, often described as the most talented field ever assembled in the Republican Party. I find it really funny how anyone that either gets fired, leaves, or gets indicted from the Trump administration, they had no importance to the Trump administration whatsoever. Michael Flynn, yeah, he was national security advisor, but like only for a few weeks before he was out. Sean Spicer, the guy who went out there and parroted all sorts of unconscionable lies for Donald Trump, who was he again? I just remember Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Paul Manafort, indicted. Guy had no role whatsoever. He was basically an intern. Anthony Scaramucci, guy lasted 7 days. Actually, that's true, but that doesn't mean that he didn't have an important role. And now, Trump's executive chairman of his campaign, chief strategist of the White House, is referred to as a mere staffer. Bannon was on the National Security Council. Yeah, he shouldn't have been. And when new chief of staff John Kelly came in, he said, yeah, no, Bannon is off there. But this is no coffee boy, which is what this statement implies by the use of the word staffer. What does seem Trump-like about this statement is that it checks all the boxes that we know are part of Trump's repertoire. He insults the other person. He discredits their previous role and work in his campaign or administration. And he pats himself on the back, right? Bragging about his primary win and saying it was really the most impressive win because the competition was just so big league from those 16 or 17 other candidates. Trump continues this statement, or Stephen Miller, whoever we think wrote this thing, in typical Trump fashion. Quote, now that he is on his own, Steve is learning that winning isn't as easy as I make it look. Steve had very little to do with our historic victory, which was delivered by the forgotten men and women of this country. What? Forgotten men and women? Yet Steve had everything to do with the loss of a Senate seat in Alabama held for more than 30 years by Republicans. Again, self-aggrandizement, bragging, patting himself on the back, blaming others for things. This time, Roy Moore's loss in Alabama was the fault of Stephen Bannon. I've just invested in every popcorn company I could find because it's time to grab the popcorn and watch this train wreck of a presidency unravel. And I said yesterday that 2018 is really getting going very, very quickly. I actually believe that what underlies this entire Trump-Bannon thing might be some resentment from Trump, that Bannon is clearly not just walking away from the Trump administration, but running away as fast as his portly body carries him. as the Trump administration implodes around his very eyes, it's still early in the Russia administration, but Trump can't run away. I'm thinking, particularly given the revelations from this new book by Michael Wolff that's coming out, that Trump wishes he could run away from this because of what clearly is coming in his impending doom. And if I were Trump on some level, I'd be kind of bummed that Steve Bannon can walk away and that I can't. I'm stuck with this. If you're Trump or you're Donald Trump Jr. or you're Jared Kushner and you're now in so deep that you can't get out, I might be jealous of the fact that Bannon can distance himself.
Maybe Trump himself will become the coffee boy. I mean, he's just playing rounds after rounds of golf and watching cable news all the time.
Listen, the real culprits here are not the president and Donald Trump Jr. They mostly played golf during the administration. The real people we need to be looking at are the ones that were actually doing things at the White House. Trump was barely even there. The guy was mostly golfing. How can we blame him for anything that went on? A Republican ethics lawyer is saying that Donald Trump's recent tweet about the nuclear button of his, that is so much bigger and more powerful than the nuclear button of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, might in and of itself be grounds for the removal of the president of the United States from the Oval Office. Any generally competent person would realize by now that Donald Trump's sort of overall lack of fitness for presidency is grounds for his removal for the presidency. That's not really a shock. But when you have a Republican ethics lawyer saying this specific comment about North Korea and nuclear weapons in the last 48 hours is ground for impeachment or removal, we should kind of listen to that. Richard Painter tweeted a series of tweets yesterday, starting with two psychologically unfit men crowing about their nukes. This is not a good way to start the new year. Congress needs to deal with one of them, and the United Nations Security Council needs to deal with the other. Going on to say, this tweet alone is grounds for removal from office under the 25th Amendment. This man should not have nukes, referring to Donald Trump. What is Richard Painter referring to? I'll remind you, in case you missed yesterday's show. The tweet in question is from Donald Trump, where he said, quote, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un just stated that the nuclear button is on his desk at all times. Will someone from his depleted and food-starved regime please inform him that I too have a nuclear button, but it is a much bigger and more powerful one than his, and my button works. So the 25th Amendment, right? This is coming up more and more. What does that mean? How does that relate to the removal of a president? The 25th Amendment says that the vice president and a majority of the president's cabinet can ask Congress to remove the president if they believe that the president is, quote, unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. Aren't we definitely past that line? And as a total side note, not related to Trump's fitness necessarily, we've also clarified since Trump's tweet about his nuclear button went out that there actually is no such button. In other words, yeah, the U.S. has nuclear weapons capabilities. The president can order their use, but it's part of a process involving many moving parts. Trump doesn't actually have a button on his desk, and it might actually be part of Trump's delusions that he thinks it's so simple, that there is some button he can push. Obama photographer Pete Souza, if you don't follow Pete Souza on Instagram, do, because he posts really, really great stuff. He posted a funny picture of a red button on the president's desk, and he pointed out that that red button doesn't launch nuclear weapons. It actually calls the White House valet. Maybe Trump actually saw that, hey, there is a red button on his Oval Office desk and thought that must be what I can launch nuclear weapons with. Not the case. Brian Stelter from CNN, who I'm generally not that drawn to following. I don't think his work is super interesting. Brian Stelter made a good point, which was, imagine for a second on the day that Trump sent this nuclear weapons button tweet. He sent 16 total tweets. And Brian Stelter said, imagine just for a moment that those 16 tweets came not from Trump, but from the president of some other country, right? French President Emmanuel Macron or German Chancellor Angela Merkel, whoever. If we in the U.S. saw some foreign leader send out those 16 tweets, wouldn't we have almost total unanimity among Americans that the person was not fit to serve? But the problem is that here in the U.S., you have such cognitive dissonance among Trumpists that they seem unable to actually see this for what it is. And I actually wondered if I'd slipped into some kind of alternate universe, a bizarro world of sorts, because I checked out Fox News after these tweets, and I don't remember if it was Hannity and Laura Ingraham or who it was. It was the whole team there. They were defending this tweet by Trump by saying, hey, this is good. Trump standing up to dictators.
It definitely is a problem, and if it was any other foreign leader, we would take it seriously. But because it's Trump, we've just become so desensitized to it, we don't take him seriously.
That's a fair point. I mean, it's the right actually supports this stuff and thinks it's Trump standing up to foreign leaders, even though what he's doing is stooping to their level. But even on the left, there is some degree to which we've become desensitized. I was talking with someone about this over the New Year. I think that's absolutely a point of it. And again, this is not Trump standing up to them. This is Trump stooping to their level, which is much different. And in this particular case, Trump even using the language of this nuclear button, that was language that was started by Kim Jong-un. Trump is really stooping to his level, not only in the sense of even engaging on this, but even using the vocabulary. Kim Jong-un is setting the vocabulary that Trump is even using to discuss these issues. Absolutely pathetic, and very, very interesting that a Republican ethics lawyer is saying, hey, he's got to go. This shows that he's unfit to lead. I'm on Twitter at @DPakman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show. Send me your thoughts about this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Laura Giblin. Laura, thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member. This is media that exists because of you. It is funded by you. And I can't thank Laura and all of our other new and longtime sustaining members enough for their support. You can join Laura at davidpakman.com/membership. You can also help us get closer to the 2,100 patron goal, at which point we will produce and release to you a 12 to 15 part mini-series on critical thinking. As little as $1 a month gets us closer to our goal at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. There is a longtime supporter of the David Pakman Show, dating back to at least 2015, if not 2014, it might be. And over the years, he's sponsored discounted memberships, and he is doing it again to really help us get 2018 going in a serious manner. 2018 could be a huge year for the program. 2017 was the biggest year ever for the show in terms of audience growth and views on YouTube and podcast downloads and distribution on radio and television. Financially, it was a complex year because of what happened with YouTube's demonetization and losing our Amazon affiliate revenue as well. In the interests of making 2018 maybe the biggest year for the show on all fronts rather than just some, this longtime supporter is sponsoring half of 33 yearly memberships. Wait, what do you mean? He's sponsoring half of them? What does that mean? Pat's looking at me very, very confused. So let me explain.
16 and a half?
Exactly. Pat's already confused with the numbers. What this means is that this Good Samaritan, as I call him, has already paid for $30 of 33 $60 memberships. He's already paid for $30. This means that 33 of you can get a yearly membership merely by paying the other $30, okay? This means that when you go to davidpakman.com/membership and sign up for a yearly $60 membership, I will give you a coupon code and you will only pay $30, okay? And the amazing thing about this is that you can keep this discounted price for as long as you want. What do you get with a membership? Well, you get the bonus show. Every single day, Pat and I do an additional show just for our members. You get the commercial-free audio feed of the show. You get the commercial-free video feed of the show. That means that instead of watching, if you're a YouTube viewer, instead of watching the individual stories published every 90 minutes after the show is produced, around 4:30 p.m. Eastern, you get the full 1-hour program as one video just for you as a member. How do you get one of these half-price memberships? Now we're talking turkey. That's a good question. You have to email me, okay? These are first come, first served. I have 33 of these half-price memberships. Go to our website, davidpakman.com, click on contact, and just write an email saying, hey, David, I want one of those half-price memberships. And in the order that the emails come in, and usually these tend to last 2 to 3 days-ish or something like that. In the order that the emails come in, I will send you a coupon code that you can use to get a membership for half price. Nice little opportunity. You get 100% of the benefits at half the price. We have a David Pakman Show discussion forum through the Reddit website. It is the David Pakman Show subreddit, and you can find it at davidpakman.com/REDDIT. And this morning I was browsing some recent discussions on our subreddit, wanted to share a couple of them with you, starting with a discussion about why does Trump hate Obama so much? This is an interesting topic because we know that one of Donald Trump's top priorities in his administration so far is to undo or destroy anything that President Obama did. But why is it that he wants to do that? We've sort of accepted, Pat, that that's what he wants to do because that's what he's shown us. But is it a personal antipathy to President Obama because Obama sort of joked at a White House Correspondents' Dinner and made Donald Trump look silly? Well, that doesn't make sense because Trump already seemed to express dislike for Obama before that.
I think it's just mostly that he wants to fulfill his campaign promises and undo most of what Obama did.
But it seems personal to me. It really does seem like it's more than that to me.
Obama did have higher approval numbers. Maybe that has something to do with it?
Jealousy in some way? I don't know. But in any case, it's a great discussion about why does Trump hate Obama so much? Also from our Reddit discussion forum, happy birthday, David. A picture of two people, neither of whom I recognize, but I think Pat might have something to explain about that.
Yeah,
wishing me happy birthday, even though it's not my birthday. My birthday is in February.
Yeah, they're a month early.
They are.
That's fascinating. One of them is from the Drunken Peasants.
Oh, is that right?
An artist from what was the Drunken Peasants?
Oh, the program formerly known as the Drunk. Is that
Yeah,
that
which
show
is
is
now
over,
defunct.
right? It's defunct. Interesting. Okay. Anyway, I appreciate it, but it's not. It's not my birthday yet, but thank you for the sentiment. Also, from our Reddit discussion forum, David has just reached 420,000 subscribers on YouTube. Congratulations. That is right. And people putting together a Thug Life meme of me wearing dark sunglasses, a gold chain, and a very, very large marijuana cigarette, I think would be the technical term for this. Because, of course, 420, a reference to smoking pot. Which
Yeah,
is
we're going to have to celebrate in some way.
We're going to have to celebrate in some way. And apparently we're doing it with Thug Life memes. Yes, we have surpassed 420,000 subscribers. That's not really a big milestone for me, Pat. Like, for me, the next big milestone is 500,000. Yeah. But I know for some people in our audience, 420 is a big thing.
And I can understand that.
Yes, sure. And lastly, from the David Pakman Show Reddit discussion forum, could Pat please comment on in vitro meat and other lab-grown animal products? Yeah, Pat is the show's resident vegan, and I don't think you've ever mentioned your thoughts on lab-grown meat. In other words, genetically indistinguishable from meat, but did not require any animal to be slaughtered, was never actually part of an animal, but at the individual genetic level, it is the same thing as eating meat. Is that something you'd be interested in?
I certainly think that there's nothing unethical about it. And if you're trying to convert people who eat a standard American diet over to veganism or vegetarianism, that's a good way to go about it. I don't know if I would eat it myself, though, because it's been a few years since I've had meat, and I just don't desire it that much.
You don't desire it
or
that
at all.
much? Interesting. What about lab-grown milk?
There's no need for that. We got almond milk, we got soy milk, we got rice milk, we got hemp milk.
Listen,
milk.
I once witnessed a hemp milk cappuccino, and it was an atrocity. It was an absolute atrocity. So I don't know. I think if there was some kind of lab-grown milk alternative, I'd be looking to do that. But Pat's known for his, don't hold it up because it's all branded, but Pat's known for his 32-ounce iced coffees, even in the middle of winter. In fact, we've got
in the middle of a storm.
We've got Bombogenesis snowpocalypse happening right outside our window right now, and Pat walked in today with a huge, I mean, it's almost bigger than his head, iced coffee filled with ice. Anyway, we're kind of getting off track. But all right, so you morally, you think that I
don't see anything wrong with it.
You have no problem, but you just wouldn't personally be interested in it.
Probably not. I would try it, maybe.
Oh, you would?
I think I would try it, but I wouldn't have like a whole meal.
What would be your go-to? Like, would you be most interested in a lab-grown steak, or are you more into charcuterie, or like a chicken wing type device?
I would go with chicken, I think, because the mock chickens that I've had are very, very similar to actual chicken.
Yeah.
From what I can remember.
Sure.
So it wouldn't be that big of a transition for me.
All right. Well, there you go. People asking about it on the subreddit. Pat has spoken. Pat has answered. Join us, davidpakman.com/REDDIT. Next, part 2 of my interview with Colin Moriarty, where we debate the death penalty.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
We're continuing our conversation with Colin Moriarty. He is the creator of Colin's Last Stand. We've talked about his political views. We've talked about taxation, libertarianism, republicanism. One area where I think we disagree is the death penalty. You're in favor of the death penalty, right?
Yes, decidedly, I think, on libertarian stance. But yes, I am for the death penalty.
How did you come to that position, and has that always been your position?
It's been my position as long as I can remember. I can't remember a position or a time when I was younger and kind of becoming cognizant where I didn't feel that way. It's, again, a principled position. I know that it's a complicated position. My girlfriend liked to show, when we started dating, showed me that movie, something of Henry Gale. It's about a death penalty case where they kind of trick the system into killing an innocent person to make a point. And I know that these things happen, that people are innocently accused, that innocent people have died, and I think that's unacceptable, and that has to be accounted for. But
how do you account for it and still have the death penalty?
Because I don't think that we have a system that is perhaps thorough enough, or that we're a little too absolutist in how it's applied. If I think that there are different, let's use Timothy McVeigh as an example, an extreme example. But Timothy McVeigh, blew up the Oklahoma City building in '95 and admitted to it and was callously bragging about it to the very end, even his last words. We're talking about how many people he would manage to kill while the government only killed one person. Well, you're conclusively executing a person who did something bad, in which there is no question that he did the crime. And I feel like in those kinds of situations, why wouldn't you want to execute that person? So I don't think we should necessarily be executing more people. I don't think we should necessarily loosen our restrictions, our appeals processes, and ignore the plight, that these various projects kind of take up about innocent people on death row, or innocent people obviously in prison for life. But just on a principled level, I haven't worked it all out. I just feel like the society has the right to remove permanently, not in jailing them, but literally remove the life of a person who has infringed on the rights of others to such an extreme degree that they shouldn't even be supported or taken care of by society anymore.
Oh, gee. Okay, let's see if we can pick that apart a little bit to figure out what the underlying idea is. So you don't want to expand the crimes that would qualify someone from the death penalty, you said. And you're okay with groups that work on exonerating people that are wrongly on death row, obviously because they're not guilty. So what is the list of crimes for which you believe the death penalty is okay?
I think murder and certain acts of terrorism, treason, things that high treason, things that are historically what we would execute someone to begin with. I used to play around with the idea of a violent criminal or rapist, for instance. Should we execute them? That sounds great, but again, I don't think that we have any love for a person in our society that does something like that. But I also want to kind of we have to show, I think, a level of humanity. I think taking a life, and not to be too Hammurabi, eye for an eye with it, but to take a life, I think, is the most extreme crime that can be committed, and that should be met with a reasonable penalty. And
okay, so let's. I'm just trying to take it a step at it. Okay, so murder, high treason. Okay, any murder, only mass murder, serial murder.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it would be a case-by-case basis.
So is there a particular, what standard would you apply? Because in the legal system, case-by-case basis, that type of judicial discretion is what gets somebody 10 days probation for violent rape in Montana, right? Or whatever case that was. So what standard would be applied? You're not sure if it would be just for mass murder or any murder. So isn't that incredibly problematic? It's up to who gets to decide based on a case-by-case basis.
Well, I mean, it would be the same judicial discretion that is already exercised in other cases, right? When you go, unless there are, 3 strike laws or something like that, a judge, and depending on the state, of course, but judges do have the right to say this is, the prosecution is prosecuting a person for a certain crime. There are certain rules on the books, and that can be kind of read into. I think that, for instance, if a person, more in a manslaughter, I guess, but if a person murders someone, admits to it, shows remorse to the family, to the system, and is put away for life, I think that's probably a reasonable outcome.
But hold on a second, Colin. Here's where I'm getting confused. Yes. Now you're saying, are you talking about manslaughter now being not on the table for the death penalty? Or if it's remorse, it's no longer a death penalty consideration in your mind? What exactly is the standard? What's the line where you say this is bad enough for the death penalty?
Well, manslaughter is not a capital crime. But
right. So I'm just confirming with you. Manslaughter, no death penalty. Murder, death penalty. Is that the line for you?
Sure. I think that's a baseline. And then I think it's just like anything else. I'm kind of confused about this situation that we're arguing about here. It's like,
well, I guess what I'm trying to the confusing part for me is, you've said that if someone does something so heinous, then it's okay to say the state is going to take the life away from this person. I'm trying to figure out what qualifies as so heinous, because the problem is, as soon as you set that line, anybody who is related to or connected to a victim of a crime that falls just short of that line is going to, in a way, feel as though their loved one, that victim, is not being taken as seriously by the judicial system and by society. That's why I think setting that line is so problematic.
I understand that's a totally fine argument for me, but I think that line already exists. You know,
right.
like,
I'm just asking what you think the line should be. I mean, I think that, my opposition to the death penalty, to lay it out, it's basically two layered, right? Layer one is the logistical reasons why it just does not work well. And you alluded to some of them, right? 1 of 25 people on death row, not guilty. Many seriously mentally ill in ways that it's questioned whether they even really understood the impact of the actions that they were taking. Countless people, you mentioned innocence projects, countless people exonerated from death row due to the proactive work of these projects, that if they didn't exist, we would have people, even more people killed who were not guilty. But then it's also this idea that it doesn't deter crime, right? We have a number of studies that show you're not deterring crime with the idea or possibility that someone might ultimately be put to death by the death penalty. We're giving the government, and particularly, you're right, libertarians, I don't know why libertarians typically are against the death penalty, because it really does give the government a lot of power, that if you're skeptical about the government's ability to even spend your taxes correctly, as you are, and you stated in part 1 of the interview, how do you give the government the ability to decide who to put to death? So those are some of the reasons I'm against it, and I'm trying to figure out how they fit into your broader political view.
Yeah, no, I think that all makes perfect sense. I think it's great that there are innocent projects that are exonerating people that don't belong in a certain place. I'm not sure that's necessarily a knock against the death penalty as much as it's a knock against the inadequacies of the justice system, the erroneous results that juries are receiving, and sometimes poor instructions from judges and all those kinds of things. I've only sat on one jury myself when I was younger, and it was a civil trial, so I don't necessarily have the experience to know what that's like. I guess I just don't know how you disconnect them, right? Because this is the system that we have. So it would be different if you said, David, ideologically, I'm okay with the death penalty. But the truth is that the fact that we even need innocence projects tells us that we can't actually trust the government to do this. And thus, I must be opposed to the death penalty because of the reality and the context in which it is carried out. But you're not saying that. You're saying, yeah, there are some problems, some logistical problems, but I'm still okay with us keeping the death penalty. And that's what I don't understand, because it seems to go against the principle you laid out. No, I mean, I disagree with that in the sense that I gave you a great example of when the death penalty shouldn't be taken off the table. A man did a heinous crime, admitted to it, bragged about it, was never sorry about it, and we executed him. Who's sorry that happened? Even if Timothy McVeigh was the only execution in the United States in the last 20 years, which it wasn't, then why would we be opposed to the death penalty being used in that specific circumstance? So what I'm saying is, even if you cut 95% of executions at the state level, and obviously with federal crimes, you cut the state executions out where it is legal, and only had 5% of them happening to the most heinous, obvious criminals who are remorseless, who committed terrible crimes, then why wouldn't we want to do that? So that's kind of more my argument, and I think that's a perfectly salient argument. No one thinks Timothy McVeigh didn't do it, so why wouldn't we execute him for it? You know,
yeah,
it's
I guess
not like,
I'm just trying to, you know, from again, I know you said that sometimes the principle is the most important thing to you, but not, you don't want to overly focus on principle. I just don't know how you can be so distrustful of the government's ability to decide how to spend your tax money, but you seem okay with the government deciding who to kill. It's just that's tough for me. It's tough for me to synchronize those two beliefs.
well, we trust the government to kill on the battlefield too. You know, just because the government's inept in some ways doesn't mean.
Do we though? I mean, it doesn't
in
sound
other
like
ways.
you do. You said you think that a lot of the military decisions that have been made and the conflicts we've gotten involved in have been bad decisions. So it actually, what I'm hearing is you don't trust the government to decide how to spend your tax money. You appear not to have trusted the government's military decisions, at least in a number of combat theaters, but you're still okay with the government deciding who to kill. That's tough. I don't know how you square that.
Yeah, no, I think that the government, as I said, I think in the previous segment, I don't agree with some of the broader conflicts that we found ourselves in, the wars of containment during the Cold War, for instance, and obviously these kind of new wars of containment of Islamic terrorism, or whatever you want to call it,
yeah,
in the Middle East. But certainly we've injected ourselves in certain ways in certain places that do make sense. And I was talking more on a personnel level that are meant, we trust our people to be trained, we trust the government to train and ready our soldiers and our troops. So the only point I'm trying to make is that I'm skeptical of the government in many ways, but I'm not skeptical of the government's ability to do anything right. Yeah. And I think that this is more of a state-by-state, kind of a 10th Amendment issue, but also, like I said, an issue of juries, an issue of the information that they're getting during trials and that they have access to. I think it's a much broader and more complicated problem than simply pointing at it and saying the government, the government, the government. I don't really, I mean, to me, I think the government's kind of influence on this ends in terms of the letter of the law, but not in the interpretation of it. So I think it's more complicated than that. I understand your point. Your point is well taken. But I'm not one of those conservatives or those kind of libertarian-sided right-wing people that thinks that the government can't do anything right. I just don't think that. And it is a principled position. But as you said as well, I don't necessarily want to get caught up on that. And I think I explained adequately that you could remove 19 of 20 death row inmates, have people that are pretty universally considered guilty, who are probably not even denying the crimes, be executed for them, and society would be better off. So I think we should never take that option off of the table, and I suspect we never will.
What? I don't know about that. I think we're quickly going in the direction, actually, of getting rid of the death penalty. The rate at which states are banning it is accelerating, but neither one of us can see the future. What would change your mind on the death penalty? Like, what evidence, if it were presented to you, would make you say, you know what, I've re-examined my view, and I'm actually no longer for the death penalty? Is there something that could change your mind, hypothetically?
It's doubtful. I think that, again, I don't think we should be wantonly executing people, right? I don't think that we should be using it loosely. But I don't think it should I just don't think we should ever be in a situation where we take it off of the table completely. That's basically it. So
what would be the downside of that? What would happen if we took it off the table that you would be concerned about, that would be bad?
That I think that sometimes it's the right of the government to kill terrible people that have done terrible things. Let's use an example of, let's say that we captured, obviously the SEALs did an amazing raid in Afghanistan, or Pakistan captured Osama bin Laden. But let's assume that he didn't die. Let's assume that we were able to bring him back to the United States.
Right.
We tried him in a Washington D.C. court or a court in Virginia.
Sure.
And then we can't execute him. It's weird. You know,
what would be the bad thing that would happen if we said life in prison with no parole, and he'll be available, he'll be at the disposal of the intelligence community for interrogation and questioning? What's the bad thing that happens if we don't execute Osama bin Laden after we capture him?
I don't think that punishment fits the crime, and that's kind of the point I'm trying to make. We can put him in isolation and let him out of his cell for an hour a day, and and give access to the FBI and the CIA.
But if the point is just deterrence, right? We've caught someone. He did bad stuff.
Deterrence is not.
He had a trial.
You're the one who's bringing up deterrence. I'm not. I don't think the death penalty is a deterrent. I don't care about that. It's about what's doing. It's about what's. I know that it's not a deterrent. The data
no. But
that.
I'm saying. I'm sorry. I might have said it in a wrong. What I mean is, we've got him, right? He's not going to commit any more crimes. He'll be in isolation in a cell for the rest of his life. What do we lose because we didn't kill him? What negative outcome is there because it's life in prison without parole instead of death?
Level of catharsis maybe for society.
So it's a form of revenge in a sense. That's the problem. That's what I thought we were getting to. Catharsis is an emotional thing, and what you're saying is emotionally you believe that the death penalty is the right thing. But from the point of view of the justice system, what does society lose out on because we don't kill Osama? We just keep him in prison for life.
Well, I should be cleared for the sake of honesty. My dad's a retired New York City firefighter, so I have, I think, an extra special hatred for what went on back in the day.
But
That might be a
with
little
all
too
due
personal.
respect, though, Colin, that more makes it, this is an emotional argument and not one based in the facts and priorities of the justice system. What I'm just trying to figure out is there
That's
any...
why I brought it up, David.
I'm sorry?
To be honest, that's why I brought it up, to be honest, about my position.
So you're saying that there is an emotional component here that is actually separate from the consequences of life in prison versus the death penalty.
Sure, that's why I brought it up, because I think it might not be the best example for me to bring up, because there's certainly...
I think that's super honest, actually. I think it's great because, you know, most people probably would not recognize that there is an emotional reason why they might be taking a particular point of view. I actually think that that's super informative, and I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, well, that's why I tried, you know, not that you have to rack your brain to think of someone like we mentioned before with McVeigh, but I'm more detached from that, which is why I like to use that as an example.
Yeah.
And using bin Laden as an example for this might be a worse idea, because I think it's, like you said, it's somewhat emotionally, or like I said, it's somewhat emotionally loaded. But I look at it as, yeah, what is lost? Well, I think what's lost is like doing what's right about the final act of saying you don't deserve to live in our society. You don't deserve to live in our society, even if you're living in a jail cell, in a prison cell. I think that the death penalty argument's always been inherently emotional. And I don't necessarily think that we shouldn't be making, you know, emotion has a place in everything, I think.
The government making a policy based on emotion, I would be concerned about that. You know what I mean? Given the actions government has taken in the past.
Sure, I agree with you on a high level, but since we're talking about the judiciary and trials, every trial has emotion in it. Every lawyer tries to appeal to you, to your emotions, and to all those things. There's always that kind of extra layer to it. I don't know that any, you know, I can't speak certainly about it, but I'm not sure that any case has necessarily been decided where emotion didn't play some role. You know, like where emotion didn't play some role inherently, maybe subconsciously, in how you feel about something. And I think that to remove that is obviously righteous in one way, because we want to have the scales of justice, which are important or are essential. But at the other end, it's what makes us human.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, you know, I would suggest that because there's no doubt that juries do act in emotional ways, we would want the justice system to maybe act as a check and balance against that. But that's probably a broader conversation, more about criminal procedure than anything else. Listen, Colin, we're out of time, but I really do appreciate you talking to me about this. And my sense is the audience will have found this conversation very interesting, because I think we were able to talk in a way that did not become mudslinging and ideological in a way that prevented us from actually figuring out what principles are sort of underlying our political position. So I think that this was super interesting, and I really thank you for talking to me about it today.
I thank you for your time. I appreciate you. Thank you. We were supposed to do this last month, and I appreciate you guys accommodating me on that last minute change. And I agree that I'm not interested in the mudslinging. I'm interested in being more constructive. We can disagree on certain things. We might not even have all the answers about certain things. I certainly don't. But I feel as if we can have conversations like this, and everyone can have conversations like this, I think we'll be better off as a society. So I'm glad to be here with you. Thank you again.
Colin, thanks, and feel free to check out Colin's Last Stand on YouTube. We will link to his channel in the video description for this interview as well.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
As we covered late in 2017, Minnesota Democratic Senator Al Franken has resigned effective yesterday after allegations of sexual impropriety. Former Republican Congresswoman from Minnesota and all-around religious lunatic Michele Bachmann is now asking God whether she should run for that seat vacated by Al Franken. I wonder what God would have to say about it. Here she is on the equally Looney Tunes Jim Bakker show, and you're going to notice along the bottom of the screen while she's talking that sales of bulk quantity food is taking place, a common staple of this program of Jim Bakker's. Let's listen to the former Congresswoman Michele Bachmann here.
Now in Minnesota, Al Franken, as you know, has resigned. I'm from Minnesota. I've had people contact me and urge me to run for that Senate seat. The only reason I would run is for the ability to take these principles into the United States Senate and to be able to advocate for these principles. The question is should it be me? Should it be now? But there's also a cost. There's a price you pay. Sure. And the price is bigger than ever because the swamp is so toxic. It has never been. And my husband and I aren't money people.
Oh yeah.
That's the thing. We're not. We're normal. We're just normal people. We're not money people. If you're a billionaire, you can maybe defend yourself. Yeah. We're not money people. And so, you know, you can have frivolous lawsuits filed against you all the time. And then what do? I mean, it is really tough. If you're going against the tide in D.C., if you're trying to stand for biblical principles in D.C., and you stick your head up out of the hole, you do, you know, the blades come whirring and they try to chop you off. Yeah, you might have noticed that 1,496 servings of some kind of food were available for $650 at the bottom of the screen, and you could get nearly 3,000 servings for just $1,200. So a little bit of a discount offered there if you wanted that. That is quite a deal, though. It's actually a pretty good deal, yeah. What the food is, I have absolutely no clue. As far as Michele Bachmann not being a money person, well, her net worth is somewhere around $3 million, right? The median American net worth for someone her age, including equity in one's home, is about $144,000. So she's not a money person because she has a net worth of only 20 times the American median for people her age. All right, interesting perspective. And here she is, unsure if she is being called to run by God for Al Franken's Senate seat. People took the position that Obamacare is bad, and so that moved the debate. I think I was wildly successful. I didn't win, but moved the debate. So I didn't shed a tear when I left the contest because I felt like, you know, I fulfilled the calling that God gave me. So the question is, am I being called to do this now? I don't know. Is God calling her to run for this seat? The most inaccurate comment in the entire video is when she says that she and her husband are normal. Anyone who's seen 5 minutes of footage of either of them knows that that could not be further from the truth. Has God ever given Michele Bachmann good advice? In fact, I'd like to know what other advice God has given her, or at least she thinks God has given her. I truly believe that Michele Bachmann would be more suited to a psychiatric facility than to the White House or to a Senate seat. Yeah, and whenever these politicians ask God if they should run or not for a particular office, it seems like God always says yes. Oh, yeah. Like you're the one to do it. And I think they do that so they don't come across as selfish or self-interested. Right. It was a calling from high above. And then when they lose, it was all part of God's plan as well. So it completely absolves them of any responsibility or maybe just blame because they were bad candidates. Now, as far as Michele Bachmann's chances for winning this seat, I would not write off her chances to win. There have been many Republican senators from Minnesota, historically. It's been about 17 years since the last one, but okay. And the types of people that Michele Bachmann would activate are exactly the types of people that vote for so-called morality reasons or because they're on a crusade for God or whatever. They might actually get out to vote in the typically low turnout midterms for her. It might be an interesting race. Michele Bachmann versus Keith Ellison, maybe. Maybe Jesse Ventura will get involved. Is that actually a rumor? Yeah, well, he was governor of Minnesota years ago. That would be interesting. But in any case, I would not write this off as just some lunatic running for the Senate with no chance to win. This is some lunatic running for the Senate possibly with a chance to win, and that's a much scarier thing. Hey, here's a little story update for you. Remember near the end of Roy Moore's failed Senate campaign in Alabama, where he lost to Doug Jones, of course? Moore's wife, during a speech, tried to defend herself and Roy Moore against claims of anti-Semitism made against them by saying that they have a Jewish lawyer. Here's a clip just reminding you of what that was like.
Fake news would tell you that we don't care for Jews. I tell you all this because I've seen it all, so I just want to set the record straight while they're here.
Yeah.
One of our attorneys is a Jew.
Moore just looks psychotic behind her as she's delivering these lines. One of our attorneys is a Jew, a dirty, Shylock, money-grubbing, money-lender Jew lawyer that we have. It sounds so tone-deaf, right? As if a Jew is something exotic. Well, actually, maybe in Alabama, a Jew is something exotic. I don't know what the Jewish population is there. This immediately became the new "I'm not racist, I have black friends." And by the way, pointing out that the one Jewish person you know is a lawyer you've hired is not exactly the most brilliant and open-minded and enlightened defense. But anyway, here's the news. It turns out that their Jew lawyer voted for Moore's opponent, Doug Jones. His name is Richard Jaffe, and he defended Roy Moore's son against drug charges 2 years ago. He's been a friend of Doug Jones for 30 years. He raised money for Doug Jones. He donated for Doug Jones. And in a way, we can kind of say Roy Moore funded Doug Jones, right? Roy Moore pays Richard Jaffe legal fees, part of which Jaffe then donates to Doug Jones. It's pretty brilliant. And you know what? Maybe they were right to be anti-Semitic. You just can't trust these Jewish lawyers. You hire them, you give them money, and then they take the money and donate it to the other guy. This is such a silly story in how much it has just completely backfired, and it seemed a completely harebrained way to try to defend yourself against allegations of anti-Semitism. Every detail is hilarious about this story.
I hope they have another response to allegations that they're anti-Semitic, right? Because they can't use this attorney as a Jew excuse anymore.
No, they can't. They can't anymore. And I don't know what their next. Maybe their maybe their accountant is Jewish as well, and they can focus on that. Wonder who that guy voted for. Anyway, I think I can say that I'm very glad to see the political career of Roy Moore effectively ended. Do you agree that this is the end of his political career, or do you think he might resurface?
He's in his early 70s at this point, too.
I
don't see where he goes from here.
What could he even run for at this point? I don't know. We have a voicemail number. It is 219-2-DAVID-P. I want to get to something that was asked for many times late in 2017. Take a listen to this.
Hey, David, Colby in Austin again. I was wondering, can you give like the origin story of the Eggman? Like, I've listened to your show daily for like a year and a half or something. I have no idea who this guy is, but you seem to really like him. So how did he become David Pakman Show voicemail regular? That's my question.
Yeah. So basically, the Eggman is a guy who lives in rural upstate New York. He is someone who is a Jewish individual who has also served time in, I believe it was a federal penitentiary, for some kind of drug-related charge. He was a victim of the war on drugs, I think it is fair to say. He is a pit bull rescue advocate. He is in favor of the death penalty, and he is against hate crime legislation. I think that those are a few sort of data points about the Eggman. I don't know why he goes by the Eggman, and I don't know if that relates to the Sonic the Hedgehog game or if it relates to the Beatles.
The Beatles song, I Am the Walrus.
Yeah.
Maybe it has to do something with that.
I don't know. But in any case, his real name, I'm not actually going to say what his real name is, but it's funny because we know him as the Eggman of drug prison fame. But his real name is something like very stereotypically Jewish sounding. Like, it's not this, but it's like if I said, oh, his real name is Jonathan Rosenbaum. That's not actually the Eggman's name, but just imagine that it's something like that. And he just started calling in years ago. I don't really know. He calls in and he has this familiar sign-off where he says shalom.
I still don't know what he looks like, too.
I'll show you. If you check out his Twitter, I think he has posted pictures there before. It is not what you would imagine. Like, from his voice, what do you think he looks like?
Maybe like a middle-aged guy, rugged in a sense. Strong guy, I would have to say, very confident.
He's definitely more, from the pictures I've seen, he's definitely more of like a big bearded.
Right, I imagine a beard.
Oh, okay. So I imagined something completely different when I first heard about the Eggman. But in any case, that's the backstory on the Eggman. And that's really most of what I know. I'm not sure even if the Eggman is a member. If he is, it might be under
I think he watches the bonus show.
He does watch the bonus show?
One way or another.
Somehow he's getting access to it, yeah. All right, so anyway, those are the origins for the Eggman. It might be interesting to do origin stories for the different people that call in. Like, for example, the Kansas Troll, who we've not actually heard from for a long time.
Troy York?
Troy York, who has called in under probably 6 different names. He has personas of all different races. There's like a Hispanic character that he calls in with. I forget the guy's name. It's something like, is it like Luis Rodriguez or something? I don't remember now, yeah. And then he has like a stereotypical black guy name. I don't remember what that one is. And anyway, we'd have to do a list of all those regular callers. Who else would there be?
It would be like a whole mini-series, wouldn't it?
Could be a mini-series,
The next one.
When we
After
get to
Critical
7,000 patrons, we'll do an origin story mini-series on all regular callers. All right, the bonus show today is just about Bombogenesis, snowpocalypse, and we'll be defining all those terms really, really precisely for you. If I showed you what's going on outside our studio window right now, you would be shocked, or maybe not if you've been watching the news, but it is basically complete whiteout conditions. Pat's wearing gigantic snow boots. I'm even wearing snow boots. Let's see if I can show them to you here.
Ooh.
And I never wear snow boots. I'm holding my boots over the desk right now.
I call this the David Pakman Shoe.
The David Pakman Shoe. Yeah, that's exactly. And I have such terrible boots that little things like this thing is just, I've just ripped off the label that says weatherproof. Trash. These are like $30 boots that I've had for maybe 8 years or something. But anyway, we'll talk about that on the bonus show today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.